Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of the Dark Pictures Anthology, Little Hope. I played it on the Xbox One, it's available on the PS4 and PC as well. But let's start with the story where you play as several characters from multiple timelines. Well, mostly you play as one set of characters from one timeline, and then at the very beginning, you play as a character from an earlier timeline. And in that timeline where the game starts, you play as the brother of another brother, and a sister, and an even younger sister, and your house catches on fire. And everybody dies. Just everybody dies. There's no spoilers there, that's the beginning of the game, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But I will say, without going into too much detail, they do a neat little element with it, but only with really one of the deaths, so Then where the meat of the game really picks up is you are a group who is in a bus on a trip and it crashes, and the only way to get out is to go deeper and deeper into Little Hope, the town. And as you do, spooky shit goes on, including like ghosts from the Salem witch trials grabbing onto you and pulling you back into events from the Salem witch trials. And you kind of have to solve what's going on there in the Salem witch trials, as well as try and survive in the modern time, because there are spooky evil monster things going around as well. And really your goal is to kind of piece together what is going on and obviously get the characters through. But before we get into the sound effects, I want to say some of the dialogue in this game is some of it just doesn't really make sense, and some of it doesn't go anywhere, and some of it really kind of comes out of nowhere and just doesn't really fit in, and it feels weird when that happens. I'm just not entirely sure how some of the lines were really supposed to work, because they just felt so out of place. And I gotta say, I felt like some of the characters were kind of bland, and that's gonna bleed into the audio. They just didn't really get me too invested in the main batch of characters. I was honestly more invested in the first batch of characters from the prologue and more of the Salem characters. Plus, there were a few times where the writing just felt kind of shit, and it affected the gameplay in a way, because it's just kind of weird when you've got these four people, one of them comes under attack, and only one of the others comes to that person's aid. It just doesn't make sense. Where were the other two? And I guess that's not a huge effect on the gameplay, but it is weird, and it just doesn't exactly make sense. But now let's get into the audio, where I'm going to say I really love the sound effects in this game. I think that was phenomenal. Man, it ramped up the tension and the horror so well. I was really impressed by it. It built up that spooky atmosphere. They did such a good job with the sound effects in the world. Like I pointed out, spooky creatures, spooky atmosphere, the sounds for them were the small, subtle sounds in the world, because there are times we're out in the woods, there are woods along the main road. They're creepy, man. They did a good job bringing that to life, bringing this ghost town to life. Then you've got the music, which I think overall the music is good, but I will say the song for the opening and ending credits, I'm not down with it. That like pseudo power ballad, like the lyrics are really actually kind of creepy and they fit, but like that power ballad kind of rock sound just feels out of place. And then in the endings, it's like this weird violin bluegrass version of the opening song, and I couldn't get into that either. And the voiceover work. I think the voiceover work is actually good in this game. There are a few times where I could have been a little more impressed with it, but I think it's good overall, which is why I was saying the characters are bland. It's not necessarily the audio. I think the voiceover work does well. I just think the character writing may not have been as good as it could have been, and it left them a little bland despite the well-done performances overall. Let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a third-person interactive narrative. You explore areas, find clues, do QuickTime events, which I gotta say, I'll get into in a bit, but I didn't necessarily love some of the QuickTime events. And one of the key elements in a lot of these games is the decision-making. The decision-making is always meant to have, like, big effects on what's going on with your relationships to the characters, and in this game I just didn't feel that. I mean, the mechanic itself works, but its implementation and how it actually affected the other characters and the interaction with the other characters, I was kind of like, didn't feel it. But I do like the exploration, I like finding the items, I like the clues that tie into the story overall. But the core of these games is the decision making. And there were times where you would say something that would lead to an action, but then you had no control over that action and it left you with something you weren't necessarily hoping for. And there were times where I felt like the action sections didn't work quite well. Which is going to now bleed into the controls because they did something kind of unique that is gameplay and action in that in the QuickTime events, they give you a prompt before they give you a prompt. They basically give you a heads up that it's coming with these little icons appearing on the screen, but the problem is you see the icon, you know it's coming, but you're still sitting there going, so what's the button? What's the button? What am I doing? What? And so you're still just as clueless, you just have a slight heads up. You're clueless to what you need to do, but you know that you're going to need to do something. Now, as for that, I felt like since I had inverted my camera, there were times where I had to move a cursor, but then the cursor was normal movement, so it threw me off, and it led to some of the action sequences not working well, and I feel like that's a camera issue. Or not a camera issue, but a control issue, and it threw me off, and then I would have to try and recover, and sometimes it would be too late. Now, as for the responsiveness of the controls, I think they are responsive. When I would be moving the icon around to try and do what I was doing, it would move and it would react, but like I said, it just felt mapped weird. When I'd press buttons, for the most part, I think they worked well. There were definitely a couple of QuickTime events where they were like, you're not actually capable of succeeding at this one. But my biggest complaint with the controls comes from the movement. And it's not necessarily the movement itself, though the movement itself is not wonderful. It's specifically that whenever the camera changes, it doesn't automatically adjust your movement. So your character will start to drift and wander off in directions that you're not trying to go, whereas I don't know why that's happening because there are so many games, including old games, that if you're going straight for your character and then the camera changes, he continues to go in the direction you had him going in to begin with, whereas in this, they just suddenly start drifting off, and it's hard to get them to recover for some reason. There were more than a few times when I was playing this game where even when the camera didn't switch, my character just wouldn't go where I was trying to get them to go. So I definitely am not in love with the controls of this game. Now let's get into the visuals, which I gotta say I love. I was really impressed with the visuals in this game. Starting with the characters, I think they did a great job with the costumes and, making them look ye olde and making them look modern and doing all of that. I think they did a really good job with all of that. And I forgot to put it in the audio, but when you're in the Salem time, man, the voiceover work and the dialogue there really fits, which is going to bleed back into this because it just really fits. They did a great job with that and building that world and that old-timey look there. But they did a good job with all of that. And as I've already said, there are creatures, and I gotta say, the creature design is phenomenal. I won't lie, and I generally don't like to draw these comparisons. It really reminded me of Silent Hill, which for me is like the pinnacle of horror games. So I really loved that design. You could really feel that there. And they just did such a good job with that I was really in love with it. I also really liked the design of the town. It feels deserted, it feels creepy. Everything about it is just spooky, and they did a great job bringing that horror element to life. Now to wrap this up, I'm going to start off with a comparison. I gotta say, this was much scarier than The Man of Medan, the previous story in the anthology. It was much scarier. But that being said, when I get to the ending, I am very much of two minds on it. I can really see what they were going for, but at the same time, it took a giant shit there for me. So I'm really torn there, and I can't just give you a definitive on the story because of the ending, but I can say I really enjoyed the atmosphere. It was just terrifying. It was a good, scary game. But some of the decision making being weak as it was, this is one of those games where I can't fully recommend it as much as I would love to. I really want to be able to, and when I saw the trailer for this game at the end of Man of Medan, I was like, yes, that looks so much better. I'm so ready for that. But now having played it, I'm sitting here going, I don't know what to tell ya. It's very much one of those experiences, for the most part, that I would like everyone to experience. You'll have to suffer through some badness, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who are going to be unhappy with the ending. So I don't know how to end this review, because I can't fully recommend it, but at the same time, I can't fully say skip it. But I guess I am going to lean a little bit more to recommend it, just because overall I did enjoy the experience up until the ending. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, are you a fan of this anthology thing that they're doing with the Dark Pictures series? Because I gotta admit, I kinda like it. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one. Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of the Dark Pictures... Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of the Dark Pictures Anthology late... Oh, fuck.